Could the traditional red state of Texas turn blue? Good evening, everyone. I'm Linda Lorelle. Welcome to Red, White, and Blue. Early in his political career, Howard Dean pioneered strategies that would prove wildly successful to the Democratic Party. Grassroots campaigning and internet-based fundraising built on a foundation of small donations. During Dean's tenure at the helm of the Democratic National Committee, Democrats gained a foothold in some of the reddest of red states, helping to pave the road to the White House for President Obama. But despite all that, many still remember Dean for his enthusiastic speech, which was replayed hundreds of times in subsequent days. It was an example of the power and capriciousness of the media. So this evening we ask, just how red is Texas? And will we see a change from red to blue anytime soon? To help us answer these questions and more, we are very pleased to welcome former Governor of Vermont, Democratic National Committee Chair, and 2004 presidential candidate, Howard Dean. Leading our discussion, as always, our hosts, David Jones and Gary Polland.
Well, Governor, I want to welcome you, but I want to figure out, what do you like to be called? Doctor, because you're a physician.
Governor,
yeah. Mr. Chairman.
I'm certainly glad that Gary recognized you're a doctor, because, you know, there are many things about the Affordable Care Act that he just doesn't get.
and so we're going to enlighten him here? Is that what we're going to do?
But you have to first tell us why, sir, you're wasting your time trying to turn Texas blue in 2014.
I actually thought Texas was going to be blue in 2012. And I think the reason it wasn't is because we had a disastrous 2010. The economy was bad. People were upset. The rollout of, the passage of Obamacare made people upset. So we didn't get there. I think Texas is not only going to turn blue, it's just a question of when. And the reason for that is the demographics in Texas are like the demographics every place else. People up north think Texas is full of these wide-eyed, wild, crazy libertarians who do stuff like Ted Nugent was talking about last night. That is not what Texas is like. Texas is a very mixed, interesting place with a lot of complicated facets to it, and people want change in Texas, and this is a ticket, this lieutenant governor ticket, that could bring that.
Well, David, that's interesting. I actually suggest the only time in the foreseeable future Texas is turning blue is when David holds his breath long enough to turn blue.
Well, you know, there are, and I'm sure you're here in part because of the state party's interest in getting Wendy Davis elected governor. In the past, Democrats for high office since Ann Richards, they've just looked like some other Republican, maybe a little bit less conservative than their Republican, without challenging the status quo of Texas politics or Texas governance, and certainly never talking about income inequality. It just doesn't come up in Texas.
Okay, so here's what the Democrats have going for them. First of all, we have a very different ticket than what we've run in the past. We have two women leading the ticket. One is Hispanic. Second, at least one of those women has genuine national star power. There hasn't been a Democratic star in Texas politics for a long time, and there is now. Whether Wendy wins or not, I can't say, but there's not any question that she has national star power. Thirdly, you've got a bunch of good old boys who have run Texas for 20 years, and they talk about the economy being great, and Rick Perry goes around the other states talking about coming. You've got the highest uninsured rate among children, 22%, in spite of CHIP. You've got the lowest graduation rate from high school of any state in the country. You've got 25% of all the people in Texas have no health insurance. Meanwhile, you're stiffing your rural hospitals by refusing to take the Medicare money. I think people, and then you do the kind of thing that Ted Nugent and Greg Abbott did, which is just demeaning to women and is demeaning to people of ethnic minorities. I think people are sick of this. I think they're going to want to change. Now, whether this is the right change, that'll be up to the Texas voters. But this is a different ticket, and it's exactly what you said. This is not the same old white bread Democratic ticket. This is a different kind of ticket. Women are in charge. I think there were an awful lot of women that have been insulted by Republicans in the past 2 or 3 years in Texas.
Certainly not by me. I have all the respect in the world for women. I'm married to a woman, have been for 40 years. But Governor, I do want to say that what's interesting, what I find in watching the Wendy Davis campaign, there's no question Wendy has star power, and Wendy has a story. Even when she tells the truth, it's a good story. I mean, the story with the embellishments was a little over the top, but that's fine. She had a good story without it. What I was interested in is how she is now changing or moving her positions more to the middle as she gets ready Party to run in November. And one of them is she's come out for open carry of handguns. I'm sure that would go really big in your home state of Vermont. And she said she now opposes third trimester abortions and other things that kind of move her toward the middle. And is this, do you believe, part of her positioning so she can attract the swing voters that obviously will decide this election?
Well, first of all, we in Vermont have fewer gun laws than you do in Texas.
Well, that's
the
good.
only thing you get punished for in Vermont is if you try to shoot a deer from a car, and we take your car. I was actually endorsed 8 times in a row by the NRA when I was running. Although this NRA is a little different than the more sane NRA that used to make those endorsements. So, look, I think what she's doing is what I did when I became governor as opposed to lieutenant governor. When you're in the legislature, you can make a lot of votes that you don't have to pay for. When you're the governor, you have a lot to do, even in Texas, where the lieutenant governor actually has a lot of power. You're basically making budgetary decisions. And I think what she's showing the Texas public is that she can be a sober-minded custodian of the public finances, and that's important. You know, the Democratic brand has been hurt in Texas. It's been hurt in part because we haven't stood up for who we are, even though I think a lot of the problems in the Texas finance are caused by things like tax cuts for people who don't need them and cutting education and this kind of stuff. So I think she's establishing her bona fides. I think you're going to have to govern Texas from the center. You can't govern Texas from the left. She's smart. She knows that. Leticia will be a terrific running mate, even though I know you don't run together in teams like that, and we don't either. But she's been around the legislature a very long time. So I think it's a great ticket, and I think it's particularly people who've been left out of all this stuff that's been going on in the last 20 years in Texas are going to appreciate this.
The governor's also, he's also a crossfire guest, so he has some national interest, and he's hopefully...
And international interest too, David, including China and the maritime boundaries.
I'm sure we'll hear about it from him. But I'd like to ask you a sort of a broad-based philosophical question almost, because of your having your hand on the pulse really nationally as well. You spoke with Ted Nugent and the hate speech. We just saw a noose placed on the statue of Meredith in Mississippi. Here in Texas, we have a fireman who posted a picture of Obama with a noose. We've got people in Tennessee and Kansas who are trying to actually pass legislation that would permit people to refuse services to gay and lesbian folks. What is going on in this country that this sort of hatefulness seems to be everywhere?
Well, first of all, I think there's a difference between a fireman or somebody putting a noose around a statue's neck or whatever happened, and the person who's running for governor of Texas having Ted Nugent stand next to him and say really hateful things and then not call him on it.
Well, that makes my point almost.
Well, yeah, but there's a difference between that. I mean, individuals, you're never going to extinguish hate. That's been with us as long as we've been human beings, and individuals do bad things. You want the governor to sign off on that? That's what bothers me. The question was not what Ted Nugent say. Ted Nugent is a nut job and everybody knows it. The problem is when Greg Abbott stands next to him and doesn't repudiate him. That does not stand for spine. And you've got to have spine when you're any governor, whether it's governor of Texas or Vermont or any place else. So that's the big problem that he's got. As far as the hate stuff and all that, we're living difficult times, and a lot of the this goes back to a bargain that Nixon made in 1968 with the Southern strategy when he decided to bring the people who were upset about desegregation into the Republican Party, which he did. The Republicans are now paying a price for that because young people won't vote for that. Young people are more conservative financially than the Democratic Party is, but they are libertarian, and they all have friends who are of every ethnicity, of every immigration status, of every religion, and every sexual orientation, and they all date each other. And they are not going to throw their friends under the bus for people who talk like Ted Nugent, and Greg Abbott apparently blessed it. So the Republicans in Washington have gotten that they have to change this party in order to win this younger generation. And that's why they keep falling further behind in every election. That's why one of the reasons I think Texas is going to be blue. They will change, but they're not ready to do it yet because they're too scared of losing that 35% of the vote that gets incited by this kind of stuff that you're talking about.
I don't even know that it's that high. I think that percentage of vote that would get excited by that is actually quite small. And one of the things that I was talking about with the lady accompanying you today was the problem in Texas is so few people vote in either party's primary. So the bulk of the people vote in November, small numbers in the primary, and the problem you have then is that the people who make decisions are those who are more excited on the issues, be
Right.
they're the right issues or the left-wing issues, and it creates a problem for electability.
I think that's true, and you put your finger on something very good when you talked about Wendy moving back to the center. That's why she has to do it, and the fact that she doesn't have a primary makes it easier to do that faster, and that's important because, as I say, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you really have to govern from the center, otherwise you get yourself in trouble.
Okay, so what we haven't talked about that I do want to talk about, which I think the big elephant in the room and the biggest problem for Democrats nationally going into this fall election, and that's Obamacare. And the fact that the rollout, quite frankly, has been a disaster, that we continue to hear things that are just very disturbing about it. And I say that recognizing that there's portions of the bill that were passed that are actually good things, that established no pre-existing conditions, portability, being able to stay under your parents' policy or till 25. Those are all positives, and it should be part of whatever we end up with. But the Obama system is a disaster. One of the problems we're having now, and you know this because you're an expert on Medicaid or at Medicare, you're having difficulty in finding doctors who want to work for you because the reimbursements or the payments for them are so low, it's not worth having patients. I mean,
well, that doesn't have anything to do with Obamacare.
Yeah, but Obamacare cut the reimbursements on Medicare in order to help fund Obamacare.
Slightly, and that's really that is only a problem in high rent districts. It's a problem on Rodeo Drive in Los Angeles or Fifth Avenue in New York, and maybe it's yeah, but that is not the real problem with Obamacare. Is that the insurance companies still run the show. This is a privatized system. This is exactly what Massachusetts did. Now, the good news is that 98.5% of all people from Massachusetts have health insurance. 75% of people in Texas have health insurance. That's a lot of people without it. If Obamacare were fully put into place, because if your government, state government, were to accept Medicaid, which I think they're going to have to do because all your hospitals, you're going to lose some rural hospitals as a result of your governor refusing to accept Medicaid. If that goes into full effect, here's what you're going to have. You're going to have a decent health insurance system in the private sector, and most people are going to be insured. What you're not going to have is cost control, because there isn't any cost control in Romney Care, there isn't any in Obamacare, and we don't have any cost controls of much significance in this country.
And I know that was something you had advocated when you talked about medical reform based on
what
your
I
experience.
believe is you have to get rid of fee-for-service medicine. If you keep paying, well, I'm a physician, right? You keep paying me to do stuff, I'm going to keep doing stuff. Well, that's not, I mean, there's an incentive to spend more money built into the system. You have to change that fundamental system. Now, that's not Obamacare's fault. That's been going on for years.
When they call health savings accounts, wouldn't that be what we call it?
The problem with health savings accounts is not that they don't work, they do. But those are not the decisions. The decision not to go on a $100 office visit to the doctor when you might not need one saves the health system $100. It's the $100,000 operation you need. That's the problem, or the sequential $8,000 MRIs. That's where the real serious money goes, and HSAs are not going to do anything for that.
So is this a trend that disturbs you at all? I noticed that the enrollees thus far in the Federal Health Exchange are about 30% in the 45 to 55-year-old range. That's not the numbers of people we wanted. We wanted that number, but we wanted to be at the 25-year range. Is that going to put, because those people are going to get sicker quicker, is that going to put pressure on insurance companies to increase premiums because of those numbers?
I don't think so. In the short run, the answer is definitely not, because there's a fund that's been set aside in Obamacare that will take care of that, so the insurance companies don't lose a lot of money in the short run. In the long run, I've never believed in the individual mandate, because I think most people will end up doing the responsible thing, which is getting health insurance. And those under 26 are already covered, as Greg pointed out, as Greg pointed out. So, look, here's where I think Obamacare cuts politically, which is the original question that you asked. There will be those who rage against it. They're not going to vote for a Democrat in any case. There will be people who are getting it now and suddenly discover that it's a good thing. They may or may not forgive the president, but it probably won't be a big issue. So I think by June we'll have a better idea where we're going to be on Obamacare.
So to be fair, it could be a significant issue or not, is what you're saying.
Yeah, because there, as you mentioned fairly all the things that are good about it, the 26-year-olds, getting rid of pre-existing conditions, which is basically normalizing the small business market across state lines.
Gary has 26-year-olds, by the way. That may have impacted his decision.
No, actually, they're not. I don't pay for it anymore.
But so I think it's a toss-up. I don't think Obamacare is going to be the disaster everybody thought in the Republican side, and I think the proof of that is that the Republicans are no longer trying to repeal it.
Well, what are the Republicans going to be doing? Maybe Gary can tell us. If as Boehner says, we're in a pause now. You know, their campaign is, we didn't shut the government down anymore, and we didn't default. Please reelect us. I mean,
well, they have a problem because, I mean, there's always, in fairness to the Republicans, not that I like to be fair to Republicans at any time, but in fairness, the opposition party always has a tough time. The President of the United States gets to set the agenda and they don't. So they're going to have a hard time coming up with any, especially after the last 4 years, with any kind of a positive, this is what we'll do if we get elected. They'll talk a lot about, jobs or whatever, but they don't have any, haven't had a jobs program for 4 years. It's not likely they're suddenly going to get one that's going to be believable. This is going to be a campaign of negativity. But Obama's not on the ballot. And the opportunity you have in Texas is to break ground and do something new. Texans like doing things new. They like leading the nation. They like changing things in ways. They are an entrepreneurial people. You've got 2 women leading. You've got an establishment that's been there for 20 years that looks nothing like the Texas electorate. And you've got people who are fed up with what's going on in Austin. I think it could happen this year.
But the election will be nationalized. I mean, most of the midterms have been for a good while. So, what do the Republicans do to counter this impulse that they seem to have, which is to just do nothing and talk about Obamacare being a failure? If you could give them advice, what would it be?
Well, the first bit of advice you would have given them is to vote to take care of the debt limit and pass the budget and not hold the president hostage, because you only control one house and you can't do it. And if you know what happened, you go back into the fall, the Republican numbers went down big when they were trying to shut down the government.
And then came along the website.
And then the Obamacare
and we rescued
website
the Republicans.
Exactly, which tells you in politics these
See,
can change
I actually
quickly.
don't think this election in Texas is going to be that nationalized. The Republicans will try to bash Obamacare and all that stuff. I think what voters are looking for is a real change in Texas. Optically, the Democratic ticket is going to appear to provide a real change. This is going to be particularly resonant for Republican women who tend, for example, in the collar counties of Philadelphia, Republican women are the swing group because they'll vote Democratic if people are tending to push women around, and which sometimes male politicians in Harrisburg have been known to do. Well, I think the same thing is true here. There are moderate Republican women who will vote for Democrats on issues like birth control, on issues like who gets to decide who makes tough decisions about reproductive life. Do you want the government full of Texas men to do that, or do you think women ought to be able to do that for themselves? I think this is, if Wendy Davis tries to nationalize this election, it's bad. She needs to run on changing Texas, and I think that's what she intends to do.
My thought on this, just to throw in for a little difference, I think you're right partially, but I think that Wendy Davis's success or failure is going to depend really on how Greg Abbott runs his campaign. And if he takes an example of the success that Clayton Williams had when he ran against Ann Richards, then Wendy Davis will be the next governor of Texas. On the other hand, if he's smart and shows the proper respect for women and treats the women right, then Republican moderate women are not going to switch and dump Abbott. But if they treat Wendy badly, I can tell you, I've already heard from women. If they treat her badly, I'm going to vote for Wendy Davis. So that could be a big problem. And some would argue, I guess David would argue, with Ted Nugent in tow.
Well, I wouldn't say
that was like an unforced error.
I would not say that they've gotten off to a great start.
Well, they both have problems so far.
That's and to be fair, we should say something about what Ted Nugent actually said. No one is
Yes, David.
No one has said anything at all.
You can repeat it, David.
Maybe, and I'll let you. What is it that he said? I don't think he said anything currently that was so obnoxious. I think it's just past.
Well, except for calling the President of the United States a subhuman mongrel.
Okay.
Well,
I mean, that's really. I mean,
and I think there was some foul language directed at political leaders who are female.
Right.
Which I'm not going to repeat.
That's part of it. To get back to the point about whether this election is the problem for the Republicans in Texas. They've been in power for 20 years. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, after a party's in power for a long period of time, people just want to try something different. And in the past, we've put up candidates who look pretty much like a paler version of the Republicans. Harry Truman once said, if you run a Democrat who votes like a Republican against a Republican, the real Republican wins every time. And so this is a ticket. We don't know what's going to happen with it. When you keep mentioning her biography, I know that her biography was screwed up and maybe it was misread. That is, in some ways, I think that's good. Welcome to the big time, Wendy. Now you're running for governor of Texas. This is a big deal. You're going to get this stuff thrown at you. This is a pretty small error. Nobody really cares whether she was married.
Nobody died, right? So that's
nobody
good.
died. Nobody well, never mind. I don't want to get myself trouble with other politicians that are
Governor,
like.
you've always been a friend of organized labor.
Yes.
And their convention is in Houston this week, and they are not all that happy with the new trade negotiations that's going on as Obama attempts to expand on NAFTA, actually, as I understand it. And he's been told by Harry Reid, you know, we're not going to take this up. So how much of a problem is this for the president? I think you're a free trader, are you not?
Well, I certainly was a supporter of NAFTA. I think the problem with the TP, the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement, and the European Trade Agreement is people don't really understand what's in them. Even I have some concerns. I want to know if you pass a law in Texas that gives you certain environmental protection under a Governor Davis, because of course the current governor would do no such thing. Couldn't resist. But if you pass a law in Texas, which does, let's just say it costs manufacturers something, would it be, this is something the opponents say, is it true that the trade agreement might negate that state-passed law to do something because it raises, artificially, is seen to slant the free trade? Now, I have talked to trade lawyers about that, and they say, no, that wouldn't happen. Well, that's the kind of information people need to know. Also, passing a trade agreement in the middle of an election year is really hard. Even Republicans, I think, would wish this would go away till after the election because it's hard for them. They have, you know, in Texas, there are a lot of working people that vote Republican, but they also know their jobs are important to them and may be related to this. This has to be done at a time when people can look at what's in it, make their own judgments. I'd be surprised if this passed before the election.
Interesting.
And I think both sides would prefer that it not pass before the election.
David was going to get into it, but I might as well get into it. The 2016 election, presidential politics. Will Hillary be challenged by a liberal, maybe you say Hillary's moderate, or a more liberal Democratic candidate? Or are we going to have a replay of Bush versus Clinton of
Gary's rooting for Dean Warren. That's
there we go.
Well, that would clearly be an ideological difference between, I assume.
Well, it's true. I'm much more conservative about money than the Bushes. That's true.
I read that in your bio. You are a fiscal conservative. Yeah. So, is the presidential nomination process for the Democrats going to be as open as it appears it will be for the Republicans?
Well, yeah. I think the answer is probably not as many candidates on our side, but there'll be more than one. First of all, I truly believe that Hillary hasn't made up her mind. I know nobody who's a pundit believes that, but I truly think she hasn't. If she runs, she's not going to clear the field. There will be other people that will run. I think it's unlikely they'll win. But this is an open seat for the most powerful position in the world. Neither party is going to give somebody a free shot at this, no matter what. I don't know what will happen on the Republican side. I think with Christie's, in my opinion, demise as a candidate, that is an opportunity for Jeb Bush to be sort of the more moderate candidate.
He's got to decide to run too, because he's undecided.
And I don't blame him for being undecided. You know, he's got lots to think about, and so, you know, who knows what's going to happen. To be honest with you, I know you had to ask that question. I just find speculating about 2016 just sort of
here's the relevance to 14 is, will Hillary Clinton get into the mix of politics in these crucial Senate races where, you know, the Democrats could lose control of the Senate unless they, you know, and will she campaign for those people?
So I think she will if asked whether she's decided to be a candidate or not. And now I have a view of this that certainly Greg won't agree with. I actually think Landrieu is going to win, Hagan's going to win, and Begich is going to win. And without one of those three, they can't, even if they do great in South Dakota and so forth, the Republicans can't win this. These are experienced pals. They know what they're doing. The public is furious with the Republican legislature in North Carolina. I think that is going to help Hagan enormously. Begich is a great politician. He's been very careful to distance himself from the president, who's not popular up there. Landrieu is now the chairman of the Energy Committee in the House. So these are really experienced politicians. I don't think they're going to lose. So we'll see. And would they want Hillary coming into their state? Maybe not. You'd have to find out what the poll numbers were before you did that. So again, this is a lot of fun speculating about it, but that's all it is.
She's soaking up a lot of money right now, and that I think they would rather see go to, state, or rather to some of the Senate candidates. Super PACs, of course, are ruining everything, are they not?
I think that was, I think Citizens United was probably the most dangerous decision for the Republic that we've seen. You shouldn't just be able to write the biggest check you could ever imagine and then double it up. I mean, this democracy really should not be for sale, and I think you'd get a lot of agreement across party lines on that.
And in fact, it's getting worse and not better.
What a way
Yeah,
to
that's
end
right.
a program with that endorsement of true democracy.
But I still think we have hope for democracy.
Thank you, Howard.
Yes, we
Dean.
do.
Thank you a
We're
lot.
still in a great democracy here.
That's right.
Wish we had even more time to discuss. Thank you so much, Governor. We appreciate your being here. Remember, you can catch Red, White, and Blue every Friday at 7:30 p.m. right here on Channel 8, and again Saturdays at 6:30 p.m. We also want to hear your thoughts on the issues that affect Houston. Submit your comments at houstonpbs.org or on Facebook. And while you're there, don't forget to like us. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again next week. Good night.